The National Electrical Code does not explicitly prohibit mounting a duplex receptacle for an overhead projector above an accessible ceiling. However, NEC Article 410.16 states that receptacles shall be installed so that at least one receptacle is readily accessible. The interpretation of this code requirement is left up to the authority having jurisdiction, which typically consists of local building inspectors and fire marshals. In many jurisdictions, AHJ require that receptacles for overhead projectors be flush-mounted in the ceiling tile. This is to ensure that the receptacle is readily accessible for maintenance and emergency situations. Mounting the receptacle above the ceiling can make it difficult to access in the following situations: firstly, replacing a blown fuse or trip circuit breaker; secondly, unplugging the projector in the event of an electrical fire or other emergency; and thirdly, inspecting wire connections. Some AHJ may allow the receptacle to be mounted above the ceiling if it is accessible via a drop-down ceiling panel or other means. While the NEC does not specifically prohibit mounting a duplex receptacle for an overhead projector above an accessible ceiling, it is generally recommended to consult with the local AHJ before doing so. The AHJ interpretation of the code requirements and their specific safety concerns will determine whether or not this installation method is acceptable. Consider the practical implications of receptacle placement. Ease of access is paramount, especially in emergency scenarios or during routine maintenance. A readily accessible receptacle facilitates quick disconnection of power, preventing potential hazards during electrical fires or equipment malfunctions. The location of the receptacle also affects the efficiency of troubleshooting and repairs. A flush-mounted receptacle is easily visible and accessible, allowing technicians to quickly identify and address any issues. In contrast, a receptacle hidden above the ceiling might require additional effort to locate and access, potentially delaying repairs and increasing downtime. When evaluating the feasibility of mounting a receptacle above the ceiling, consider the available access methods. Drop-down ceiling panels can provide a convenient way to reach the receptacle, but their accessibility might be limited by obstructions or the height of the ceiling. Ensure that the drop-down panel is easily removable and provides sufficient clearance for working on the receptacle. The design of the ceiling system also plays a role. Suspended ceilings with readily removable tiles offer better access compared to fixed ceilings with limited entry points. Evaluate the ease of removing and replacing ceiling tiles to ensure that the receptacle remains accessible for maintenance and repairs. The height of the ceiling also influences accessibility. High ceilings might require the use of ladders or scaffolding to reach the receptacle, increasing the risk of accidents and making maintenance more challenging. Consider the ergonomic aspects of the installation and ensure that technicians can safely access the receptacle without undue strain or risk. Furthermore, the placement of the receptacle should comply with all applicable electrical codes and safety standards. Ensure that the receptacle is properly grounded and protected from overcurrents. Use appropriate wiring methods and connectors to prevent electrical hazards. Consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that the installation meets all requirements. Local building codes and regulations might impose additional restrictions on receptacle placement. Some jurisdictions might require specific types of receptacles or wiring methods for overhead projectors. Check with the local building department to ensure compliance with all applicable codes. The AHJ interpretation of the NEC is a critical factor in determining the acceptability of a receptacle installation. The AHJ has the authority to approve or reject installations based on their assessment of safety and compliance with the code. It is essential to consult with the AHJ early in the planning process to avoid costly rework or delays. Provide the AHJ with detailed information about the proposed installation, including the location of the receptacle, the type of equipment to be powered, and the methods used to ensure accessibility. Be prepared to address any concerns or questions raised by the AHJ and to make adjustments to the installation as needed. In addition to the NEC and local codes, consider industry best practices for receptacle placement. The National Electrical Contractors Association, or NEC, provides guidelines and recommendations for electrical installations, including receptacle placement. Following industry best practices can help ensure a safe, reliable, and code-compliant installation. When selecting a receptacle for an overhead projector, choose a high-quality device that is rated for the intended application. Ensure that the receptacle has sufficient amperage capacity to handle the projector's power requirements. Consider using a receptacle with built-in surge protection to protect the projector from voltage spikes and surges. Use appropriate wiring methods and connectors to ensure a secure and reliable electrical connection. Avoid using undersized wires or loose connections, which can cause overheating and electrical hazards. Properly torque all connections to the manufacturer's specifications to prevent loose connections over time. Label the receptacle clearly to identify its purpose. Use a permanent label that indicates the receptacle is for the overhead projector. This can help prevent accidental disconnection of the projector and ensure that the correct equipment is plugged into the receptacle. Regularly inspect the receptacle and wiring for any signs of damage or wear. Check for loose connections, cracked receptacles, or frayed wires. Repair or replace any damaged components promptly to prevent electrical hazards. Keep the area around the receptacle clean and free of obstructions. Avoid storing items near the receptacle that could block access or create a fire hazard. Ensure that the receptacle is properly ventilated to prevent overheating. Consider the aesthetic aspects of receptacle placement. A flush-mounted receptacle can blend seamlessly with the ceiling, creating a clean and professional look. However, a receptacle mounted above the ceiling might be less visually appealing. Balance the aesthetic considerations with the practical requirements of accessibility and safety. In summary, the placement of a receptacle for an overhead projector requires careful consideration of the NEC local codes, AHJ interpretations, and industry best practices. Prioritize accessibility, safety, and compliance to ensure a reliable and code-compliant installation. Consult with a qualified electrician and a local AHJ to ensure that the installation meets all requirements. Consider the long-term maintenance and accessibility of the receptacle. Plan for future repairs and upgrades by providing adequate access and clearance around the receptacle. This will simplify maintenance tasks and reduce the risk of electrical hazards. Also document the location of the receptacle for future reference. Keep a record of the receptacle's location, wiring details, and any relevant information. This documentation can be helpful for troubleshooting and maintenance purposes. Provide training to users on the proper use and maintenance of the receptacle. Explain how to safely connect and disconnect the projector, how to report any problems or concerns, and how to respond in the event of an electrical emergency. By following these guidelines, you can ensure a safe, reliable, and code-compliant installation for an overhead projector receptacle. Remember to consult with a qualified electrician and the local AHJ to ensure that the installation meets all requirements and that you are working in accordance with best practices in the field. Think about the environment the projector will be operating in. In a dusty or humid environment, the receptacle and wiring should be protected from moisture and contaminants. Use a sealed receptacle and conduit to prevent corrosion and electrical hazards. In areas with high levels of vibration, use vibration-resistant receptacles and connectors to prevent loose connections. Consider the impact of the receptacle placement on other building systems. Avoid placing the receptacle near sprinkler heads, HVAC ducts, or other critical infrastructure. Ensure that the receptacle does not obstruct access to these systems or create a safety hazard. Plan for future expansion and upgrades. If you anticipate adding more equipment or increasing the power requirements of the projector, provide additional receptacles or wiring capacity. This will avoid the need for costly and disruptive upgrades in the future. Evaluate the cost-effectiveness of different receptacle placement options. A flush-mounted receptacle might be more expensive to install than a receptacle mounted above the ceiling. However, the increased accessibility and ease of maintenance might justify the higher cost. Consider the long-term benefits of a well-planned and executed installation. A receptacle that is properly installed and maintained will provide years of reliable service, reducing the risk of electrical hazards and equipment failures. It is good practice to perform regular inspections and testing of electrical systems, including receptacles, to identify potential problems before they become serious. Use appropriate testing equipment to check for voltage drops, ground faults, and other electrical anomalies. Implement a preventive maintenance program to ensure that receptacles and wiring are properly maintained and that any necessary repairs are performed promptly. Consider the use of energy-efficient receptacles and wiring methods to reduce energy consumption and lower operating costs. Use receptacles with built-in energy management features to automatically turn off power when the projector is not in use. Install energy-efficient wiring and conduit to minimize energy losses. By following these guidelines, you can ensure that the installation of an overhead projector receptacle is safe, reliable, and energy efficient. Remember to consult with a qualified electrician and the local AHJ to ensure that the installation meets all requirements and that you are working in accordance with best practices in the field. Be sure to provide clear and concise instructions for users on how to properly use and maintain the projector and receptacle. Explain how to connect and disconnect the projector safely, how to report any problems or concerns, and how to respond in the event of an electrical emergency. Encourage users to follow these instructions carefully to prevent accidents and ensure the safe operation of the projector. Also, periodically review and update the instructions as needed to reflect any changes in the equipment or procedures. Always prioritize safety and compliance when working with electrical systems. Take the necessary precautions to prevent electrical shocks, burns, and other hazards. Follow all applicable electrical codes and safety standards. Consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns. By following these guidelines, you can ensure that the installation of an overhead projector receptacle is a safe and successful endeavor.